Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk, and for the past month, I've secretly been developing my next commercial indie game. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the progress on this project and what I'm doing differently from Slimekeep. So to start off, what is this new game I'm developing? Well, if you see my last devlog, you already know because it's actually the same game that I made for the GMTK game jam this past summer that I'll be continuing to develop. Now, if you haven't seen the devlog, I'll fill you in. For the GMTK game jam, me and another developer named X-Ray and my composer friend KJ created a simple roguelike barn builder called Wrangle Ranch. In Wrangle Ranch, you have to lasso animals on your screen to capture them, giving you points and cash. You can spend your cash in the shop at the end of a round to purchase new animals to add to your barn, upgrade existing animals, and also purchase unique synergies that give bonuses for capturing certain groups of animals, adding a layer of strategy to the game. Additionally, each round in the game gets progressively harder with ever-increasing points requirements to move on, and you'll also have to add predators to your deck, which steal your hard-earned points and cash. Overall, I was super happy with the game my team and I created in just 4 days. It felt like it had tons of depth and potential, and we got tons of positive feedback on it from the game jam. We even got 51st in the enjoyment category, which out of nearly 10,000 submissions is pretty good. So it felt like a natural next step to continue developing this game and see where it goes. Okay, so let me walk you through our Wrangle Ranch development plan. First of all, I should be clear that the game will not be solely developed by me. I'll still be working with X-Ray and KJ on the project, and I think we make a great team and have a similar vision. I should also preface that the game is not going to be another 5-year-long project like Slimekeep. I promise. I think I've learned so much from Slimekeep, and this project is definitely the polar opposite of Slimekeep development-wise, as my goal with the game is to get it out within the next few months, ideally before the end of the year. And I actually think this goal is fairly attainable. Our Game Jam game gave us a super great base to build off of, and our goal for the Wrangle Ranch Steam release is to just spend a few months adding more content and polish overall to make the game even more fun. We just want to refine the game loop and focus on a rapid development cycle, not bogging the game down with unnecessary features and increasing the scope. The great thing about prototyping is that we already know our game is fun, but we just want to add a bit more depth and replayability. As for marketing, we're also taking a very different approach this time as compared to Slimekeep. For Wrangle Ranch, we're really focusing on getting a fun, playable demo out as soon as possible. We also really want to focus on the Steam Next Fest in October, as well as the Animal Fest in November. Info-wise, the game will probably be around $5 or $6 on Steam, and should be available on mobile devices at release, which is also uncharted territory for me, but thankfully X-Ray has some experience there. Okay, now let's talk about actual development progress. The first thing we wanted to do was focus on refactoring some of our old messy game jam code. One key thing I wanted to do with Wrangle Ranch is making sure all of our systems are clean and scalable from the beginning, as this is something that I really struggled with for Slimekeep. We aren't trying to go over the top trying to write the cleanest code possible, as we want the game to have a quick development cycle, but we are trying to make sure to start with a good foundation and get rid of some of the clunkier game jam code. So I did some light refactoring to the code base, which I think helped. The next big thing we wanted to focus on was getting the Steam page up and running. So we created the Steam page, which means that you can wishlist the game right now using the link in the description. Seriously, please consider wishlisting the project. It takes like 2 seconds to do so and helps out a ton with the Steam algorithm. Anyways, the next thing we worked on was animal and synergy balance. See, since the game is heavily dependent on these numbers, we wanted to get them right. And I think we did a fairly good job for the given time frame during the jam. However, some of our animals and synergies were way too broken or underpowered. So X-Ray and I hopped in a call, discussed every single upgrade and synergy in the game, and made appropriate changes. Obviously, we'll have to do lots more testing and tweaking to get the numbers right, but I think this was a good start. The next thing I worked on was fixing up some issues with the shop in the game. There were some small bugs here and there, and also many of the items in the shop were missing proper descriptions. So I added all these in, and the shop was feeling so much better. X-Ray on the other hand fixed the game's scoring system to now allow for bigger exponential numbers, as well, who knows how big the player's score will eventually be able to get. And on the topic of score, a big complaint with the game so far was that the player could technically lasso a group of animals just as the game ends, and those animals wouldn't count towards their points requirement. So the player could lose the game even though they really didn't. So I fixed this up and added some text to pop up letting the player know that it was a close call. In the meantime, X-Ray started working on refining the lasso logic in the game to make it feel as good as possible, as after all, that's what you'll be spending most of your time in the game doing. And I got to work adding localization to the game, so the game would be as accessible as possible. We wanted to do this early on, as I know setting up localization later into development can be a massive pain. So I got to work and found out that thankfully Unity has their own built-in localization package that seemed pretty good. Essentially, you can have a big dictionary of keys here, and then for each language you want to localize into, you can specify what that key should map to. So the key game.points would return points if I'm playing the game in English, puntos if in Spanish, punti in Italian, and so on. As for actually building out this big localization table, I set up a Google Sheet that could link to Unity with all my keys and English translations for pretty much every single piece of text in the game. I then used Google Sheets' built-in Google Translate function to automatically translate all this text into 10 different languages. This was really neat to set up, but I definitely understand that Google Translate isn't perfect and there is real value in hiring human translators and localizers, so I'm sure sometime in the future we'll pay native speakers to review or retranslate this text. Anyways, now that I had all these translations, I needed to go through the very tedious task of actually setting them up in game. I used a built-in Unity script called localized string event that worked pretty well with static text, but working with dynamic text such as the points or cash counters was a pretty big pain, and this whole process took me so long, it really could have been its own video. Anyways, after localizing every single piece of text, we still weren't quite done. I had to reformat tons of UI, as for example, some words or phrases are short in English, but really long in other languages, so I had to make sure to auto-size every single piece of text in the game so it doesn't overflow or look weird. One final hiccup I had with localization is finding fonts that have proper support for different languages. See, the font we use for the game right now just has support for basic ASCII Latin characters. If I try to type in a Chinese character here, we get these empty boxes of doom. So I had to find a font that fit the game's style and had support for a bunch of different languages. Thankfully, I found this one that seemed to work pretty well, but it's still a pain to actually implement as I had to switch fonts at runtime depending on what language the player was actually using. I also can't import every single character from this massive font file as there are tens of thousands of unique characters, so I still haven't fully figured out that one, and I've used a kind of scuffed manual approach. Anyways, after a few days, I got the localization setup pretty much done, which will hopefully pay dividends later on. By this time, X-Ray had also massively improved the lassoing logic to feel so much better and more polished overall, and we both moved on to new tasks. I created a basic trailer for the game in which we hired a voice actor with a southern accent to voice over, which was a fun time to edit. I think the trailer turned out great, so here's a brief clip.
Welcome to Wrangle Ranch. Here on the ranch, you'll be tasked with wrangling all kinds of crazy critters using your trusty lasso. As you learn the ropes, you'll be able to grow your herd, upgrade your animals, and mix and match powerful boons to form game-breaking combos.
Anyways, X-Ray got to work on some new animal logic and movement for the game, and I also drew up some new animal art to accompany. These new animals likely won't be in our initial demo release, so I'll hold off on talking about them for now. Anyways, I then worked on some features that aren't super flashy, but definitely necessary to turn the game into a full commercial release. Firstly, I created a simple pause menu, which we didn't have time to add during the initial jam. I also spent a few days creating a logbook where the player could see all their stats they've accumulated from playing, such as their total animals wrangled and their most purchased boons. Which, by the way, we decided to change the name of synergies in the game to be boons, as it felt more unique and fitting. Finally, I created a settings menu with some basic settings options, which again isn't super flashy, but was definitely necessary. Next up, I worked a bit more on the shop in the game. I added some polish when purchasing upgrades, but more importantly, I created rerolling logic so the player could reroll all items in the shop, with a cost of course that would increase permanently throughout your run. This way, the player would be able to manipulate the shop, but couldn't just spam rerolls every shop to dig for a certain boon or animal. Now, the final thing I worked on in this devlog was visual variation. One issue with the game right now is that it always looked the same. There's always this same green grass background, which got tiring to look at after a while. So I created this scheme manager script to quickly throw together some visual variation. With this scheme manager, I could define schemes that would have a chance to override the base game and change the colors of the background around, as well as randomly spawn items. So now there's a chance for each round to be on a dirt background with these grass patches, or in a savanna with this dry grass. But that's all I've worked on for Wrangle Ranch so far. I'm really excited to see where this project goes, as I think we've made great progress so far, and I hope you'll stick around for the ride over the next few months. We're hoping to get a demo out later this month, so to keep updated with that, please do consider wishlisting the game on Steam if you haven't already. It would mean a ton to me. Anyways, thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.